Hello. People say trust is the foundation of any marriage, but they never tell you what to do when that foundation starts to crack. Do you ignore it, patch it up, pretend it's just settling with time? Or do you start looking closer, pressing your fingers against the surface, waiting to see if the whole thing collapses beneath you? I wasn't looking for cracks. I wasn't questioning my wife, Olivia. I had no reason to. Our life together was steady, predictable, even. We had been married for 8 years, together for 10, and while the initial fire of passion had cooled, I thought we had something stronger in its place. Something solid. I was wrong. It started with something small. My car had been acting up. Nothing major, just a flickering dashboard light that was more annoying than anything else. I had ignored it for weeks before finally bringing it to a local service station. The mechanic told me it was an electrical issue, something they could fix in a couple of days. No big deal. I went about my life, barely thinking about it. Olivia drove her own car, so she never had to deal with mine. Everything was normal. But then, the day before I picked up the car, Olivia started acting a little off. It was subtle, barely noticeable unless you knew her as well as I did. She was distracted, checking her phone more often, tapping her fingers against the counter while making dinner. When I asked if everything was okay, she smiled too quickly, nodded too easily. It was the kind of answer that was technically right, but didn't feel right. I told myself I was overthinking it, but something about the way she avoided my eyes stuck with me. I picked up the car the next day, paid the bill, and drove home without thinking much of it. It was just a routine repair, nothing special. But later that evening, as I was cleaning out the glove compartment, I remembered something. The dashcam. I had installed it over a year ago after a minor accident, just for security. It automatically recorded while the car was running, saving clips onto a memory card. I hadn't checked it in months. Why would I? But after getting the car back from the shop, I figured I'd take a quick look, just to make sure everything was in order. Not because I suspected anything, just because I was curious. I took the memory card out, plugged it into my laptop, and started scrolling through the footage. Most of it was exactly what I expected. Recordings of me driving to work, stopping for gas, parking outside our house. Everything looked normal. But then, I noticed something strange. A clip with a timestamp from a day I hadn't been driving the car. My breath hitched for just a second. Maybe the mechanics had turned the car on to check the dashboard, I told myself. Maybe they had taken it for a test drive. But as I clicked on the file, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Because the moment the video started playing, I saw something I wasn't expecting. The engine was running, the dashboard illuminated in the dim light. A hand reached out, adjusting the rearview mirror. A hand with neatly manicured nails. A hand that wasn't mine. I sat back in my chair, my pulse steady but slow, an unfamiliar tightness in my chest. Olivia. She was in the driver's seat, adjusting the mirrors, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I frowned, watching the screen. She almost never drove my car. She had her own, and she always insisted she preferred it. If she needed to go somewhere, she took hers. So why was she in mine? The video continued. She looked around, checking something outside the car. Then, she reached into her bag, pulling out her phone, typing quickly before setting it down in the cup holder. A few seconds later, the passenger door opened. The clip ended. I stared at the blank screen, my mind racing. I hadn't seen a face, hadn't heard a voice, but something about the way she had moved, the way she had checked her surroundings, made my stomach twist. This wasn't a casual errand. This wasn't normal. I clicked on the next video. The passenger door was already open, someone sitting beside her. Their face wasn't visible. The angle of the dashcam only showed a glimpse of a sleeve, a watch, a blurred movement. Olivia turned toward them, smiling at something they said, laughing softly. Then the clip ended again. I sat there, motionless, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wasn't jumping to conclusions. Not yet. But something about this felt wrong. I had thought Olivia and I were solid, steady. Now, I wasn't so sure. And for the first time in our marriage, I had the sinking realization that I might not know my wife as well as I thought I did. The next few hours felt like a slow, suffocating blur. I sat at my desk, replaying the footage over and over, each time trying to convince myself that there was some logical explanation, that I was overreacting. But with every replay, the reality sank deeper. My wife, the woman I trusted, had been lying to me. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right in front of me. That smile on her face as she turned to the person sitting next to her. It wasn't the smile of a woman casually picking up groceries. It was the smile of someone caught up in something much deeper, much more intimate. The idea that she had been sneaking around behind my back, using my car for these secret meetings, made my blood run cold. I thought about the hours I'd spent working, the late nights, the trust one had given her. And this was how she repaid it. But instead of confronting her right away, I decided to wait. I wasn't going to let my emotions take control. I needed to know more. I needed to understand the full extent of her betrayal. I spent the next few days acting as if everything was normal. Rachel didn't suspect a thing. She went about her usual routine, smiling and talking like nothing had changed. She even continued to wear the wedding ring, the one I knew she had left behind in that man's car. She acted like nothing was wrong, like she was still playing the role of the perfect wife. The irony of it hit me hard. She had convinced herself she could fool me. She had convinced herself that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't look close enough. And she was right. Until I decided to start looking. I began paying more attention to the small details, the subtle changes. I paid attention to the way she answered questions, the way she'd glance at her phone when I wasn't looking, the way she avoided eye contact when she thought I was distracted. The more I observed, the more I realized just how much she had been hiding. But I still needed to know who this other man was. I had seen his silhouette, his sleeve, but I hadn't seen his face. And that's when I got an idea. I knew Rachel's habits better than anyone. I knew she liked to text when she was on the go, especially when she thought I wouldn't catch her. So, I did what I never thought I would do. I checked her phone. She had always been meticulous about her privacy, never leaving her phone unattended. But I had access to it. She never hid the passcode, and I never thought to question it. Now, as I picked it up, I wasn't just looking for messages. I was looking for a name, a clue that would lead me to the truth. It didn't take long. Her messages were neatly organized, not too much, not too little. The usual exchanges with friends, a few from work, and then I saw it, his name. David. My stomach dropped. I had heard that name before, but it wasn't until now that I realized the significance. Rachel had mentioned him before, always in passing, always as just another colleague or business partner. But this wasn't business. This wasn't an innocent friendship. I scrolled through the messages. There were more than I expected. The texts were full of flirtation, of inside jokes, of plans to meet up. The messages weren't just casual. They were intimate, full of longing and excitement. And what bothered me the most? They were recent. The dates lined up perfectly with the late nights she had claimed were work events. It was all right there, hidden in plain sight. One message stood out. I can't wait to see you again. We'll make sure no one knows. Promise. It made me sick, but it also gave me what I needed. The confirmation I had been looking for. Olivia had been cheating on me, and David was the one who had been taking her away from me. I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not until I had everything. I decided to follow through with the plan. I didn't need to ask questions. I already had all the answers. What I needed was to make sure that when I exposed the truth, it would be undeniable. I wanted her to feel the weight of every lie she had told, every moment she had spent sneaking around behind my back. I started by taking the next step. I called a private investigator. I didn't want to rely solely on my instincts. I wanted solid, professional confirmation of her betrayal. The investigator would be discreet, following Olivia, getting photos, tracking her movements. He would confirm the extent of her affair with David. In the meantime, I started preparing. The more I thought about the situation, the more I realized I wanted something more than just revenge. I wanted to make sure this didn't happen again, that she wouldn't think she could just move on from our marriage without consequences. I began gathering everything, her financial accounts, her investments, our assets. I made sure everything was locked down, that she wouldn't be able to pull a single cent out once the divorce was filed. This wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about making sure she understood the gravity of what she had done. I didn't want to destroy her life, but I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed either. Then, the investigator gave me the final piece of the puzzle. Olivia and David weren't just meeting at hotels and sneaking around when I wasn't around. They were already planning a future together. The moment I found that out, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The following week, I invited her to dinner at a luxury restaurant, our usual spot for special occasions. She had no idea what was coming. I'd been playing the perfect husband, giving her everything she thought she wanted. Now, I was going to give her something else, something she couldn't possibly ignore. I arranged everything perfectly. I had the perfect ending in mind. And when dessert came, it wasn't just any dessert. It was a cake with a twist, topped with the real wedding ring and divorce papers. No way out. No way to deny it. And I couldn't wait to watch her face when it all came crashing down. The weight of what I had seen on the dashcam sat heavy in my chest for days. I had replayed the footage too many times, watching Olivia slip into the driver's seat of my car, adjusting the mirror like it was hers, waiting for him to slide into the passenger seat. The laughter, the easy intimacy, the kiss, it was all burned into my memory now. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I watched. I noticed the small things, the way she seemed a little too aware of my mood, how she studied me when she thought I wasn't looking, searching for any sign that I knew. Maybe she felt something was off, a shift in my behavior, a slight change in my tone, but she had no idea that I was 2 steps ahead. Then, something unexpected happened. Olivia came home from work one evening, her face pale, her usual confidence gone. She was rattled, tense in a way that told me something had shaken her badly. I acted normal, pretending not to notice, letting her unravel on her own time. She kept glancing at her phone, opening and closing it like she was expecting a message that wasn't coming. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured herself a glass of wine, something she only did when she was stressed. Something had happened. I waited until she went to bed before checking her phone. She had been more careful lately, deleting messages, keeping things locked down, but she wasn't perfect. And tonight, she had slipped. There was a message from an unknown number. "You should tell him before he finds out on his own." A cold chill ran down my spine. This wasn't from him. This was from someone else. Someone who knew. I scrolled further, but there was nothing else. No response from her, no follow-up. Just that single message, sitting there like a loaded gun. Who had sent it? Had someone seen her? Had one of our friends figured it out? Or worse, had he slipped up and told someone? The paranoia that she had spent months making me feel was now consuming her, and I wasn't about to stop it. The next day, I decided to push things further. I knew she had been using my car when she thought I wouldn't notice, so I set up a little test. I left my keys on the counter, casually mentioning that my car had been making a weird noise again. I said I might need to take it back to the shop. Her reaction was immediate. She hesitated. Just for a second, just long enough for me to see the wheels turning in her mind. Then she shrugged, feigning disinterest. But later that night, when she thought I was asleep, she took my keys. I watched from the window as she stepped outside, slid into my car, and sat there for a long moment. Maybe she was checking for messages. Maybe she was panicking about whether there was more footage she hadn't erased. Then, she drove off. I let her go. I had placed a tracker under the driver's seat earlier that evening. Her destination? The same place I had seen on the dashcam. She wasn't done. She wasn't stopping. And now, she was about to learn what it felt like to be watched. I had been patient. Too patient. I had spent days watching Olivia unravel, seeing the paranoia eat away at her, knowing that she could feel the walls closing in but had no idea who was pulling the strings. She had tried to cover her tracks, replace her missing wedding ring, act like nothing had changed. But I knew better. I had seen the truth, and now I was about to see it again. This time, in real time. The tracker I had placed in my car told me exactly where she was going. The same destination from the dashcam footage, the same location where she had been meeting him. She had been careful before, but now she was slipping, making mistakes, too shaken to notice the way I was piecing everything together. That evening, I decided to follow her. She had left the house under the usual excuse, something vague about running errands, nothing specific enough to question. She thought she still had control, thought she could maintain the lie just a little longer. But she was wrong. I arrived at the location a few minutes after she did, parking at a distance, far enough to observe without being seen. It was a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, one of those small, dimly lit places that felt secluded enough for secret meetings. And there she was, sitting by the window, her posture relaxed, her face glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. But it wasn't for me. It was for him. He was sitting across from her, leaning in slightly, speaking softly. His hand rested on the table, inches from hers, that kind of closeness that spoke of something deeper, something hidden from the world. I watched them for a while, watching how she smiled, how she laughed in a way that seemed effortless, how she touched his wrist lightly as she spoke. She wasn't acting like someone carrying guilt. She was acting like someone who had already moved on. The anger I thought I would feel wasn't there. There was no rush of betrayal, no heartbreak, just cold certainty. She had already left me. She had just forgotten to tell me. I stepped out of my car and walked toward the cafe, my heart steady, my mind clear. I wasn't here to yell, to fight, to demand answers. I was here to make sure she never forgot this moment. As I walked through the doors, the sound of my entrance barely registered over the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses. Olivia didn't see me at first. She was too focused on him, on maintaining whatever fantasy she had built around her betrayal. But then, she looked up, and the blood drained from her face. The second her eyes met mine, I saw it. The split second of sheer panic, the tightening of her grip on the table, the way her breathing hitched ever so slightly. She had been caught, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone, turned on the camera, and held it up. I smiled, tilting my head slightly. She looked at me, her mouth slightly open, frozen in place. The man sitting across from her, David, finally noticed the shift, turning his head to see what had caused Olivia's sudden change in demeanor. His expression flickered with confusion, then slow, dawning realization. I tapped the screen, took a picture, and lowered my phone. Olivia's hands clenched, her fingers trembling slightly, her breath unsteady. She wanted to speak, to explain, to try and salvage whatever scraps of control she thought she had left. But I didn't let her. I pulled up my messaging app, attached the picture, and sent it. To everyone. Her family. My family. Our friends. Even her boss. No message. No caption. Just the image of Olivia and her lover, frozen in time. Caught in the moment they thought they had kept hidden. The second her phone buzzed on the table, her face twisted in horror. She grabbed it quickly, her eyes scanning the screen, realizing, too late, what had just happened. The restaurant was silent. She wasn't just caught. She was exposed. I turned to leave, feeling nothing but satisfaction as I walked out the door. She had spent months, maybe years, controlling the narrative, lying, manipulating, keeping me in the dark. Now, everyone knew the truth, and there was nothing she could do to take it back. The fallout was immediate. The moment I sent the picture, Olivia's world collapsed. I didn't stay to watch the chaos unfold inside the cafe. I didn't need to. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing with notifications. Friends, family, people who had once believed in our marriage, now staring at undeniable proof of her betrayal. I ignored them all. I drove home in silence, my mind eerily calm. I had imagined this moment in 100 different ways, but none of them felt as satisfying as the quiet certainty settling over me now. I was free, not just from her lies, but from the weight of a marriage that had died long before I ever realized it. When I pulled into the driveway, I wasn't surprised to see Olivia's car speeding in right behind me. She had left him behind, driven straight home, desperate to fix what couldn't be saved. She was crying before she even stepped out of the car. Her face was pale, streaked with mascara, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the door. She barely took a breath before rushing toward me, her voice cracking, her words a frantic, disjointed mess of excuses, apologies, and empty pleas. She begged for forgiveness. She swore she had made a mistake, that she never meant for it to happen, that she still loved me. But all I felt was disgust. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry she got caught. The realization hit me like a wave. This wasn't a woman desperate to fix her marriage. This was a woman desperate to save face. She wasn't mourning the loss of us. She was mourning the loss of her carefully crafted image. And that was when I knew. There was nothing left between us. No love. No trust. No second chances. She had taken everything we built and thrown it away, believing she could always come back, believing she would never have to face the consequences. But now, she had no choice. I walked past her without a word, unlocking the door, stepping inside. She tried to follow, but the locks had already been changed. She pounded on the door, sobbing, screaming my name, begging for me to talk to her. I didn't. I simply stood there, staring at the life I had once thought was real, knowing that the woman outside was nothing more than a stranger now. She had spent so long lying to me, convincing me that I was the one who needed to prove my loyalty. But in the end, the only person she had fooled was herself. And now, she had to live with the truth. Alone. Bye-bye.